Howdy, this is Barry Johnson. Welcome back to another edition of Studio Talk. Recently, I did this video right up there, and that is Mac versus PC. Which one is best for your home project studio? And I think at the conclusion of that video, you'll find out that either one of them would do a great job. Now, some things that I want to share with everybody. If you decide to go Windows, there's some things that you need to do. You still have all of these people that have negative opinions of trying to operate a digital audio workstation within the Windows operating system because historically there have been a lot of problems, and frankly, there still are, but they're all easily fixable. There are things that you have to do to properly set up your PC so that you can optimize the effectiveness of your DAW and limit any errors or any problems that you have along the way. Now, one of the first things I want to touch on before I get into some of those things, one, understand that I'm a Mac user, primarily a Mac user. However, in the past, I've built a lot of Windows PCs specifically for digital audio workstation and had that as a side business for a while. So I've got quite a bit of experience building them and optimally setting them up. So there's a key word in what I just said, and that's called building your PC. Too many people make the horrible mistake of thinking that they can just buy a pre-made Windows laptop or Windows PC uh, geared towards your average user and then expect that to work effectively within your digital audio workstation. I'm here to tell you right now, for most of you out there who don't choose properly, and that is most of you that do this, don't do that, okay? Don't go out and buy that type of computer. Some of you would have done your homework and looked into and properly bought a properly specced out computer. But surprise, 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 if you buy a properly specced out PC, you can honestly expect to pay just about as much for that PC as you will for that Mac. So, can you build Windows PCs cheaper than you can buy most entry-level Macs? Historically, yes, that's been the case. However, Apple Silicon is changing that somewhat. But regardless of that, um, yeah, if you're going to go out and buy a $600 PC that's already made, you didn't build it yourself, odds are you can expect to have a lot of issues with that. And I think that's where a lot of people have developed their frustration because, quite frankly, they simply don't know what they don't know. Nothing wrong with that. There's lots of things that I don't know because I don't know anything about them. It's not a criticism, it's an observation. Okay. And so, what I want to guide you through, and this is not going to be a super long video, but I want to guide you through some of the things that I always do when I'm building a PC for either a friend or selling to someone else to use in their home project studio. There's a couple of things that you want to make sure you always do. Buy the right motherboard. First of all, forget buying a PC off the shelf. Just forget about it. Build your own PC. That way, you know you're going to set yourself up for success. It's very, very, very easy to build a PC. I mean, incredibly easy to where the novice can easily do it. Okay, there's tons of videos out there on how to do that. I suggest you go look at those. But the core fundamental aspects of it is the motherboard is the first thing you've got to focus on. You've got to focus on it. What you want to do when you build your PC, you want to think about future expandability. You don't want to put together a PC today that is just going to meet your minimum needs. Yes, you may want to save money, but you're going to end up spending more money down the road if you don't take the time and be patient with that. All right. So, make sure you're buying the right motherboard. Now, some things to look for on the motherboard is most likely at some point you may need, to add additional PCIe peripherals in your computer. So you want to make sure you've got enough PCIe slots and that accommodate both long form as well as short form PCIe cards. And so you want to make sure that you can do that. Some PCIe cards that are fairly common out there, at least historically. Now, some of this is starting to change with how fast Thunderbolt and USB-C is. But historically, you've got like Pro Tools HD native cards, Pro Tools HDX cards, These are all PCIe cards. You have Universal Audio makes their PCIe cards to be able to run as an option to be able to run their plugins. Of course, you can buy the dedicated satellite units via USB and Thunderbolt, but PCIe is also another alternative for that. You may need to add additional peripherals later on, maybe add additional USB-C ports, additional Ethernet port. There's all kinds of things that you may want to add later on. And so you want to give yourself the option to do that. So make sure you're getting a motherboard with a good variety of PCIe slots in it. Second, find a motherboard that does Thunderbolt. That's going to be a little bit harder and it's going to cost you more money. I strongly recommend that you do that. USB-C is incredibly good, the latest incarnation of it. And quite frankly, it's just about as good as Thunderbolt. But you are going to find in the audio world with interfaces and everything else like that, Thunderbolt is way more widely supported and integrated into these devices than USB-C. So you may limit your options if you just go with USB-C. Okay. Now, next, you want to make sure that you're buying the most powerful CPU that you can buy. You want to do your homework on the CPU. Not all CPUs are equal. All right. You want to do your research, look into it, and get the fastest CPU you can afford today. All right. If you can afford to go all the way, go all the way. But if you can't, get the fastest that you can afford today, knowing that later on you can upgrade that CPU. You can pull the old one out and put a new one in and upgrade your computer later on as you develop more funds. So you want to get the fastest CPU or the most powerful CPU you can afford. Today, AMD Ryzen is probably your best bet. Although Intel makes some great processors, AMD has surpassed them over the last few years. So I would strongly recommend that you look at those CPUs. It's what I use in my builds, okay? Or at least over the last few years. Before that, it was primarily almost all exclusively Intel. Um, Next, you want to get the right amount of RAM. Now, don't overdo it on RAM, okay? You don't use a ton of RAM in the digital audio world. The only exception to that would be is if you do a ton of virtual instruments where you need to load samples into memory. There you're going to need your RAM. But for the most part, the majority of DAW operators out there can operate perfectly fine at 16 gigabyte of RAM. Although I probably recommend going to 32 because that's going to help you if you do other things outside of that. But that is certainly a good starting point. Don't spend more money on RAM today than you need to get an adequate amount of it to be able to run your digital audio workstation, because RAM also continues, like everything else, continue to drop in price. So later on, if you find you want to add more RAM, I guarantee you by the time you get to that point, RAM's going to be cheaper and you'll spend less money on it at the end of the day. Now, next up is your hard drive. At the very least, you want to put an SSD as your system drive and an SSD as your audio drive. As fast as SSDs are, I strongly recommend that you have one drive dedicated for your operating system with your applications and everything, another hard drive dedicated to your audio where you put your DAW sessions on, and then third, another drive to put your samples on for your virtual instruments and virtual drum plugins like, Superior Drummer or, tune, Steven Slate drums, whatever it is you may be used, and you put those on that drive. Okay. That's going to give you the fastest performance overall, where with the read write and time trying to access different things at different times is going to give you the flexibility of it. Now, there's a lot of people would argue today, and they're probably right, that you can actually intermix your sound libraries with your audio on your SSD because that way of working I just talked about is really a mandatory way of working when you're using 7,200 RPM drives, the mechanical spinning drives, of which for the most part you shouldn't even consider for anything other than backup, and I'll get to backup in just a second. Um, but you want to make sure that you're using SSDs for this. They're just so much faster, so much more reliable, and they're cheap. Now, I strongly recommend for your system drive going with an NMVE, however you say that, it looks like a little stick of RAM. It's an SSD drive that you can install. Most motherboards, you can install those directly. And if you want to go that route for your audio drive as well as your system drive, but the very minimum, I recommend that you go with that for your system drive. Okay, now system drive. I strongly recommend. Hey, I recommend something, everybody. I strongly recommend that you do no less, a very minimum of a 1 terabyte system drive. For most people, you should be able to be just fine with a system drive with 1 terabyte and get all the things you need to on it. But that's the very minimum. Don't do anything less than that. That's going to be important. So later on, if you realize you need a larger drive, maybe you're going for whatever reason you're going beyond the capacity, you're using a lot of apps and things beyond that are pretty intensive as far as space requirements go. You can always replace that SSD later. You can pop that SSD in an external enclosure and use it as an external drive, as an example. Okay, let's talk about external drives and backup. And you're, another reason why you want to build the tower is you want to be able to put a backup drive that backs up everything that we just talked about. So we've talked about 3 SSD drives. You got your system drive with your operating system and all your applications. We've got your audio drive where you store all of your DAW sessions. And then lastly, we've got the virtual instrument sample library as well as drum library for any of those that you may use. Now, you've got those 3 drives. I recommend buying probably a 5400 large 5400 drive, large 7200 old 5.5 inch. 5.5. I forget this. You know what I'm saying? The larger hard drive. For whatever reason, I'm drawing a brain fart on the exact size of it, but anyway, so that size hard drive, it's cheaper. You can get more storage for your money and have that in there so that now you create 3 separate partitions on that drive so that it can back up those 3 things together all at one time. And that's internal into your PC, right? Next, you want to have the equivalent of an external drive that also does the same thing. So you've got redundancy, you've got a backup of a backup. That external drive only plug in when you're actually backing up and you choose to do that, for that 3rd drive. You may not need to do that one as frequently as you do the internal drive. Internal drive, I would back up once a day. The external one, you may only do it once a week and you set a little reminder on your phone to do so. So you plug that back in. When I say plug in, I'm talking about physically plugging and unplugging the USB-C or Thunderbolt cable, whatever you're using to connect that to from the computer, as well as the power connector to the wall. Why do you do that? I've got another video out there on the importance of backup and how to go about that and understand why things are so important. You should go out and watch that. But the shorter answer is this thing called lightning strikes, okay? You don't want to end up losing your drive because you had a lightning strike that hit your computer, and now all of a sudden all your drives are fried, maybe even your computer, God forbid. But you've got a backup of all that very important data. So if you have to start over, you've got one that was not plugged in. I can't tell you how critical that is. And that has to be part of your game plan when you're doing this thing. All right. So you want to get the right CPU, the right motherboard, and then get the right quantity and styles of hard drives for your computer. RAM is pretty much, you don't have to buy super expensive RAM. Just buy whatever your motherboard recommends. It's not going to matter that much at the end of the day. So buy what you can afford. Buy some lesser expensive RAM out there if you can find it. Okay. So now you've kind of got all of that, and that's the core foundation of your PC as far as parts are concerned. Now, I'm going to actually walk you through a list that I particularly go through when I'm optimizing Windows. So I'm actually going to go grab my phone here in a second, and I'm going to read through that so that you can see the things that I do. And this particular list is readily available out there on the web. I have found out that this one has been the one that works the best for me, and I don't have any issues. Again, the number one, there are 2 issues that people have when they try to do Windows for digital audio workstations. One, you're not using individual components. Okay. You do not want to buy a computer that has integrated components. And I'm talking about a desktop. Obviously, if it's a laptop, you're kind of restricted and you're going to have to really do your homework on speccing that laptop out. Typically, if you get one that's highly optimized for editing 4K video or doing gaming, most likely your law of averages is it's already specced out pretty good, and you're probably going to be okay. And most likely, neither one of those have anything integrated. One key thing that I just realized I forgot in going through this, and that's your video card. Okay. Your video card for digital audio workstations is not critical. You don't necessarily need to buy the most expensive video card. And if you didn't know it right now, video cards are out freaking what's the word I'm looking for? Outrageous. Okay. They have gone up massively during the pandemic, affected by the chip shortage. You got a lot of people scalping things. So keep that in mind. If any reason right now, until those prices come down, even more of a reason to buy a cheaper, less expensive video card that you can get rid of later and replace with a better one later on. But if you're just doing audio, your video card is not something you have to spend a ton of money on. That said, again, some pre-built computers have the video card built into the motherboard. You don't want that, okay? You want a dedicated video card. So look into that. Now, if you're also going to do other graphics things like gaming or editing video and things like that, then you're going to need to up your game on that video card, but buy the video card that's best suited for those particular things, knowing that it's not going to make a huge difference in your digital audio workstation as far as optimization is concerned. You obviously want to get one that's compatible with the motherboard, and things like that, but you should easily be able to research that, do your homework before you do it, and there's so much resources out there to figure that out, okay? So now let's get back to how the list and things that I go through when I'm optimizing a Windows computer. So let me grab my phone. All right, these aren't necessarily in any order. You just have to do them all. Um, okay, so first up, you want to disable your system sounds. You don't want the computer's sound effects interrupting your recordings. So here's how to turn that off. Go into Control Panel, into Sound. In the Sound tab, under the Sound Schemes, select No Sound and select OK. Next up, you want to adjust your processor scheduling to background services. This will enhance the operation of your PC's audio drivers. Go into Control Panel, into System, then to Advanced System Settings. Go to the Advanced tab, click Settings under the Performance, and the Performance Options window will appear. Advanced tab, select that next, change processor scheduling to background services, and then select OK. Next up, adjust your PC's power options to high performance. There are times you may want your computer to conserve energy when you're making music, is it one of those times? Make sure your PC is always functioning at full speed to preserve your audio performance. Go into Control Panel, Power Options, click High Performance. Next, click Change Plan Settings. Ensure both power options are set to Never. Really important. Make sure your PC doesn't suspend your USB devices. You don't want your USB keyboard being disabled if you leave your computer for too long. So while on the power options screen, click the plus button next to USB settings, click the plus button next to USB selective suspend settings, double click enabled, click disabled, and then say OK. All right, next one up, disable Windows background apps. Make your PC concentrate only on your music. Make it stop doing other things in the background. Start menu, go into settings, then to privacy, select background apps, change any apps you don't want running in the background to off. Next, this is freaking critical. Critical. While Windows 10 runs scheduled updates, you do not want it updating when you're in the middle of a track. The same is true for your third-party apps. You want to disable Windows updates. Go into the Start menu, into Settings, Update and Security, Advanced Options. Choose how updates are delivered. Slide from on to off. Some other critical points. Turn off Windows Firewall and antivirus apps. These programs can interfere with your audio recordings. For optimal efficiency, make sure they're turned off. To safeguard against viruses while your firewall is turned off, disconnect your PC from the internet. Yes, pain in the butt, but do you want it to work right or not? All right. The advantage of this is you won't be distracted by emails or funny cat videos while you're supposed to be making music. That's one of them, but there's a lot of other advantages too. Next off, switch off animated windows. Windows 10's visual effects, such as animated windows, use extra power from your PC, which could be used to improve its audio performance. Do you really need them? If not, switch them off. Go into Control Panel, into System, Advanced System Settings, then the Advanced tab. Click under Performance. The Performance Options window will appear. Visual Effects tab, select Custom. Untick animate windows when minimizing and maximizing, and then select OK. Another really important one, switch off your screensaver. I don't care how cute it is. Okay. If your DAW is running, it can cause glitches if your PC switches are set to its screensaver. Turn it off. Right click on desktop, select personalize, click on screensaver, and then select none, and then say OK. Next up, update your PC's graphics driver. Make sure everything on your computer is up to date. Obsolete drivers can slow your PC down. Here's how to update your graphics drivers. Go into Control Panel, Device Manager, click the triangle next to Display Adapters. Your graphics card should appear. Right click, Update Driver Software. Okay. Next up, update your PC's network adapter driver. Update your PC's network and adapter driver. Again, outdated drivers can slow down your PC. Here's how to update the network adapter driver. Go to Control Panel, Device Manager, select Network Adapters, locate your manufacturer and network adapter model. There may be multiple adapters. Go to your manufacturer's website to download the latest drivers, okay? Install the latest drivers. Make sure you keep your hardware, such as Sense and Groove boxes, updated with the latest driver. Visit your manufacturer's website for the latest downloads. Okay, next up, turn off USB power management. Free up space on your USB bus, helping your PC recognize devices and install drivers correctly. Go into Control Panel, Device Manager, double-click Universal Serial Bus Controllers, double-click the top USB root hub entry, then click on Power Management tab, uncheck the Allow the computer to turn the device to save power, say OK, repeat for all USB root hub entries. Optimize hard disk. Improve playback of audio file by optimizing your PC's hard disk. Right click on the Windows logo, File Explorer, left column click This PC, right click on the drive where you store your audio, click Properties, uncheck Compress this drive to save disk space and allow files on this drive to have contents indexed. Apply OK. Repeat for other drives if necessary. Disable user account control. User account control can cause problems with read-write permissions. It's better for audio curation to have it disabled. Go into Control Panel, User Accounts, change user account control settings. Set to never notify. Then say OK, then restart your PC. Next up, disable fast boot. It may take longer, but your computer will reboot in more of an optimal state if you disable the fast boot options. Go into Control Panel, Hardware Sound, Power Options. Click Choose What Power button does. Untick Turn Off Fast Startup. Close all programs you're not using. Don't have any apps running that you don't need. Disconnect any USB devices that you're not using. Okay. Try not to use USB hubs. Now, this is hard. I get it, which is why you want to select the right motherboard, and which is why you want to give yourself some options out there to install maybe a PCIe card that has additional USB ports on it to eliminate this particular problem, but try not to use them. Okay. Lastly, run your DAW as an administrator. Right click on the icon for your DAW's properties, then go to compatibility tab. Check Run this program as an administrator, and then click OK. All right. That's a lot, right? How many of you people who've been frustrated with Windows did all of those things? Do you ever wonder maybe if you actually did them, you'd have a freaking rock solid monster of a digital audio workstation computer? Well, I'm here to tell you, you will if you've done all of the things I talk about. If you bought your PC off the shelf and you think you're going to get great performance in the digital audio world, well, if you do, you just got lucky, baby. That's all I can tell you. You just got lucky. Now, I doubt there's any Mac users watching this right now, but I have to tell you, I'm going to give a little sarcasm to both the Mac users and the PC users. You know all these steps we just took to optimize that computer for digital audio workstations? You know what you got to do on a Mac? Plug it in and go. That's it. You don't have to do any of these things. I mean, absolutely none of them, all right? And so keep that in mind when you're contemplating one over the other. Stay humble. But if your computer is properly set up, I promise you, if you put the right components in it and you set it up properly, you will have years of flawless service out of that computer. The only time you're likely to have issues is if you don't continue to follow all of the recommendations that I just gave you that ultimately, quite frankly, I got from somebody else called the World Wide Web. And I've been using that checklist ever since. I have found that it ensures that I'm going to get rock solid compatibility for the most part. Okay. All right. So when I say for the most part, sometimes you got some driver and firmware issues and things like that you got to deal with that are outside of those things. But you'll experience that if you haven't experienced it already. If you've already experienced it, you know what I'm talking about. And you knew, don't waste your time with that, or at least what I just said. Okay. You obviously got to waste your time doing the drivers and firmware and all that stuff. Okay. So if you like the content I put on this channel, if you like the subjects and the things I talk about, do me a favor, hit that like, that subscribe, and that notification bell so you'll get notified when I got a new video out. I'd be more than happy to continue to talk to you out there because I love you. I don't know you, but I love you. So until next time, let's have a loving day. Hey, that sounds kind of cheesy. Well, I like cheese. Have a great day. Bye-bye.